Welcome to the Global Innovators in Business series. Our guest today is Brian Sheng. In 2021, he and his brother Eric Sheng started a company, Aquaria Technologies, with a mission of providing more drinking water, especially where sources of water are being depleted due to climate change. The company uses a process called atmospheric water generation, which takes water from the air and purifies it for human use. Their products, such as Hydropixel and HydroPack, are designed to make clean water accessible even in areas of diminishing water resources. He joins us today on the Global Innovators in Business series, and we're so excited to have him. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here. Thanks for reaching out. And I took a look at some of your other podcasts as well. Really excited to join a number of other founders on this podcast.
I'm so grateful to have you on too. And I think I wanted to start the conversation at Princeton. You're a D1 varsity football athlete. Is this true? How
That is true.
I don't know that much, but I don't think an Asian face is very common in a D1 football. How did you train to become a football player? And what is a lesson or what is a story from that experience that has guided you in the rest of your career?
That's interesting. That's the first thing you mentioned. But you're totally right. There weren't a lot of Asian players. I immigrated to America, actually, originally. I was an immigrant from China, actually, when I was very little. And so part of what I thought of fitting into American society at the beginning was to play sports. And so in middle school, I decided that football would be a great way for me to learn more about what American sports were like. And I just got hooked on it immediately. And so I started playing and training ever since then and all the way until playing in college.
Wow. Is there anything from being a football athlete that you think translates into starting a business or venture capital?
Oh, absolutely. Building a business, being a football player, being a athlete in general, I think there's so many lessons that carry over, right? Grit, resilience, teamwork, especially a sport like football, which I would argue is one of the hardest sports, physically demanding sports and a very good team sport in America. Definitely today, I still keep not just my physical practices and working out and everything like that, but actually a big part of it's mental. The ability to push through when you feel like you've given it all, the ability to keep it going even when over three quarters, four quarters you're down, and all of a sudden being able to not all of a sudden, but as you persevere and persist throughout the game while down the whole game, being able to turn it around and win at the end. Those are all scenarios through playing football. Actually, one of my most memorable games was playing, it was the Princeton Harvard game when I was a freshman. And I think it went into something like six or seven overtimes. And for 20 minutes straight, it was like the craziest up and down roller coaster ride. But at the end, we won. Definitely a lot of lessons from sports that carry over.
I think the one reason that football caught my eye is I feel like it's a very risk-taking sport rather than a risk-averse sport. I play tennis. It's been a sport I played all along. I think a lot of Asian families focus on these sports that are like tennis, golf, but there's so much physical contact, so much in football that I think is a really interesting kind of collision of your physical prowess, but also how to face those challenges head on and compete. Jumping a little bit forward, first of all, I think let's start with Aquarium. Tell us about the company, tell us how this idea came about, and what are you trying to do?
So what we're doing at Aquaria is we are unlocking another option for us to get access to water at a time when our resources are rapidly being depleted, especially because one of the main ways we actually suffer from the effects of negative of climate change is just less accessible and less clean water. So how we do that is by harvesting air. There's actually more than 200 times more water in the air, in the atmosphere around us than what humans consume. So the question is, how do we create a technology that allows us to bring that down into our hands for us to use? So that's what Aquaria does. We are focused on R&D, product development, and the installation of um, atmospheric water generators. That's what these products are called, so that communities can have access to an alternative source of water, whether it be drinking, which one of its main purposes, or actually for other holistic backup purposes as well, such as when a hurricane blows through Florida, what happens to the hospitals, and when clean water is needed, we can provide that as well.
So one of the big technology innovations is atmospheric water generation. What exactly is this? And give us an example or like analogy of what this entails.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we understand what this is conceptually at its most basic form, which is like on a hot summer day, you're inside, and then sometimes you'll just see fog on the windows, right? Or water droplets forming, or like morning dew. These are essentially condensation. It's liquid water versus vapor water in the air. Creating water from the air, just that point alone, is not necessarily very difficult. But the question is, how do you create technology that can do this at scale? How do you do this in an energy efficient way? And so we're essentially actually a combination of a material science company. We're a cooling and thermal engineering company. And then we're also I would say like a residential or a property solutions company. We're a couple of different things at once, where we're going from the science of designing a highly effective atmospheric water capture device, and then also designing that and implementing that into its actual use place, so that Chris, you're able to drink or use atmospheric water without having to leave your house, leave your school, or your natural environment. So that's what we're doing in Aquaria.
That's super interesting. And this problem has been on my mind for such a long time. And I remember having a conversation when I was in Oxford with students, and I was like, water is going to be such a big issue. And her response to me was very short. It was like, oh, I don't think water is going to be such a huge issue in the future because water is everywhere. And she explained that like the total amount of water in the earth likely will stay the same. The challenge is how do we untap that and how do we uncover and leverage that, which I thought was a really interesting mindset. And then seeing your product and seeing how you're using it fills that circle of, wow, this is one of the solutions. But I'm curious, why hasn't current solutions worked? Why hasn't desalination scaled up? Why hasn't other like purification strategies or other ways worked?
Sure. I think actually your conversation with the other student was right on point, and I think that's that is part of the correct mindset. I think you should be simultaneously optimistic and pessimistic about water, and you have to have both sides of the equation, because what he or she said is absolutely correct. There's water everywhere. There's water in the atmosphere, there's water in ice caps, there's water in the ocean. The question is, how do we distribute that, and how do we access it, and how do we make sure it's clean, right? Those are like different problems. Water is geographically unequal in its distribution. Some countries and part of the world have massive amounts of water, and some don't. And then you have the issue that because of commercial activities, industrialization, we just have a lot of water that's not clean. So how do you make it clean water? So when we look at the solution set today, it's not as if we don't have any solutions. We have plenty. We have desalination, we have water treatment, etc. The challenges here is that there's a couple of challenges, but I'll name two in particular. Water is a one size fits all solution. The only way we provide water today, whether it's a desalination or it's a water treatment facility, it's a centralized infrastructure approach where it's large capex, large projects. You're trying to serve minimum a community at a time. If it's not really, you're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. So fundamentally, it's a infrastructure project, large bureaucracy, permitting, et cetera, et cetera. So you're essentially trying to move a tank the entire time. Versus, let's say, even when we're talking about energy, you could get 20 different options. You get solar, you could get wind, you could get batteries, you could get backup generators, you could do any number of things to control your power supply, right? Microgrids, even in Africa. But those options aren't really available. So then when you look at water from a solutions perspective, The only way to provide water is to build large facilities. If that's the only choice, then how many people or how many governments or how many organizations have the ability, the money, the willpower, and the execution of building water supply? Then that kind of already cripples your ability to implement water when the amount of tools you have is very few.
Mm,
Then the second and probably larger problem is that water is like the only water is like the most uh, unbalanced commodity in the world. We die if we don't have it, and yet it's worth nothing to most people.
mm,
So that's an incentives problem for water. I think those are probably the two largest issues when it comes to water.
Could you expand on the second?
Sure. If you look at water pricing, some of the cheapest places for water are like Texas and Arizona.
Mm,
That doesn't make sense, right? Texas and Arizona have no water.
yes.
And then on top of that, if you look at the what the value of water should be versus what you actually paid for water in dollar terms, it's also uh, unmatched. Basically, the government subsidizes all water. Water is a right of life. It is not a luxury commodity. And so the government subsidizes billions of dollars. This is all governments everywhere, by the way, subsidizes water or controls water so that it's subsidized. And so it's one of the only commodities where supply and demand doesn't work.
Mm,
Supply and demand is supposed to, in some ways, balance out, right? You have your market player in place for whatever
mhm.
commodity it is. And then there's just some markets that are more efficient and there are arbitrage opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, nothing's perfectly efficient. But then in water, it's just doesn't make sense. The supply and
Interesting.
demand just doesn't make sense. So that's where you have situations where Arizona has some of the cheapest water in America. That makes no sense.
That's fascinating. Okay, if the other solutions are currently not yet in place and not yet energy efficient, how is your solution different and how can we scale this? And what is like the bottleneck to scaling the solution to remote areas in the
Mhm.
world?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily the other options are bad. I think we
Hmm.
need all of them. We just need more water solutions in general. Like I think
Hmm.
desalination is has great potential. We need to increase the number of desalination plants. We need to decrease the pollution from desalination plants, etc. So I'm not saying that desalination is not the solution, but desalination doesn't work everywhere. What happens if you don't have an ocean, right? That's the most straightforward example. So what we do at Aquaria is that we're giving another tool where we allow you to control your own water supply. Our smallest unit, you can plug it right into a wall in your house and make up to 24 gallons of water a day. So that's plenty of water for your whole family to drink and cook every single day, even if your well is contaminated and anything like that. So what we're trying to do is provide a solution that you can control and then have flexible access as long as you have sufficient air in the water from the air. And plenty of places don't have that.
That's so fascinating.
For the
What
most
kind
part,
of,
most people have never heard of an atmospheric water generator.
yeah, me too, before this interview. What prompted you of learning about atmospheric water generation and like how did you get involved in water?
That one is actually quite simple. I wrote my thesis research at Princeton on distributed energy and water infrastructure. So water was part of it. Actually, completely unintentionally, I'm wearing my Princeton shirt today. This is just just randomly wearing a shirt. But yeah, that's where it all started.
Hmm. And you co-founded this company with your brother. How did that come together and how is it working with your brother as a co-founder?
Actually, interestingly enough, my co-founder, my brother, actually also went to Penn. I think for us, it's been working great.
Hmm.
We are quite opposite in our skill sets, quite complementary. So I think that's always important on the founding team to have very complementary, differing skill sets. So that's super important. And we've had our entire lives to figure out other conflict resolution scenarios. So it's been working great.
I think finding a good partner in crime in building a business is one of the most challenging things to do as a founder. And I think there's risks of having a family member be that person that you co-found a company with, but also there's numerous, like you can trust them and so many benefits. How do you navigate the balance of having both business relationship and a family relationship, especially in something as high stressed as building a company together?
I think first of all, that's extremely different from every person, even if you're put in the same situation.
Mm,
For us, it's actually those two qualities are actually not necessarily conflicting or they have to be separated. When we first started working on this, there was a mutual understanding of the commitment and sacrifices necessary. And even then, I think has gone beyond what we perhaps expected.
mm,
But that commitment is what allows us to resolve challenges when they come up. It's what allows us to navigate any type of problems that come up since it's running a startup.
mm,
Anything can emerge along the way. And so I don't think it's necessarily dividing the two and trying to navigate more that is it any more difficult than any other problems you face running a startup? The fire burning down in every department every other second? No, I don't necessarily think so. Actually, I think it's a strength that allows us to be able to push forward without having to worry about that.
During this process, what has been the time that you felt the most lost, the most difficult in the startup journey, and how did you overcome it?
So we actually almost ran out of capital more than once. And so we actually bootstrapped the company with
Mm,
several million dollars before we decided to raise outside capital.
mm,
And when you're weeks away from running out of capital, you're not exactly in the choosing position for which beggars can't be choosers. You have to take any capital that comes your way or compromise on any number of things. But I think so that was the challenge. That was very difficult and happened on more than one occasion. But along the way, actually, we coming back to the football lessons, we ended up speaking to probably close to 200 funds to kind of raise our first institutional round. And along the way, we were able to find people that were fantastic investment partners. I should say investor slash partners, not investment partners. And they were better and more suitable than anyone we originally spoke to when we were in those desperate times. And so I think there's a lesson here, not only about persistence, even when you're imagining getting rejected close to 200 times. It's not
mm,
exactly, I don't think anybody's built to face that level of rejection, which could be first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and going through the whole game down the entire time. But I think there was a level of internal conviction on how important it is what we're doing. The partnership between my brother and I, again, in dark times, I think that was a strength that we know that neither of us would be deterred in achieving things, that they all came together. And ultimately, of course, we have been able to prevail and things are doing incredibly well. And I think we're scaling it right at the time when we need our technology more than ever.
mm. That's fascinating. And this happens while you were really like weeks away from running out of capital.
Yeah, I'll tell you the expectation of what actually happened. We were out to raise $10 million.
Yeah.
We ended up raising $100,000. And during the initial kind of the 3 weeks I was running my first process,
Yeah.
and we basically let that 100K last us another couple of months. And during those couple of months, I went out and spoke to almost 200 funds and
Wow.
then got the round eventually done and found the right investment partners. But imagine kind of the despair that happened between, oh, we're going to do this and get $10 million in the next couple of
Yeah.
weeks to, wow, we got $100,000. How is that even? That is not what we expected. But now I can talk about it looking backwards and it's okay. That's part of just where like adds even more conviction. And ultimately the process is what was necessary because looking back, even as if we got the capital the easy way, I
Mm-hmm.
think we would have lost a lot of that kind of the experience or the DNA built up over this process that I think in startup speak, it's like we're a wartime founding team,
Mm-hmm.
and the founding team was built during bad times,
Mm.
and bad times make strong teams.
That's such a good story. Thank you for sharing. And also, I think it's a really interesting story because you previously was also you ran a small VC called Fresh VC, and you understand the process on the other hand of like investing in companies. First of all, I'm so interested in hearing how did Fresh VC come about and what was your mission and mindset when you started this VC and how you've seen the two sides of the door. How are they different and what is something that a you won't know until you're a founder raising capital that the investors potentially don't see.
So I think it's the power dynamic. When I started Fresh VC, I was actually a freshman in college. And I think this is back when social network first came out. So I think the idea that young people found can start the best companies, that was the idea. It was let's move to Silicon Valley. Let's find a bunch of other Mark Zuckerbergs. And because we're young, we can do everything and anything to build together the greatest companies. And so Fresh's investment thesis was um, we are looking for fresh ideas, disruptive technologies that can change the lives of millions of people. So we were, whether rightfully or by luck, looking at deep tech companies 10 years before deep tech even became a term. We were investing into AI way before AI was a thing. We invested in a Princeton company called Fisconote back in 2014, and they did predictive analytics and AI for government legislation. Um,
Mm,
they're currently publicly traded on NASDAQ, and they were doing AI 15 years ago, or not
mm,
15, 12 years ago. We became the lead investors and basically incubated a company called Ease, which was the earliest medicinal cannabis delivery company for therapeutic patients in America, and now the largest. And I think, again, it was like because it was a combination of we were trying new ideas, but then also we were looking for things that can really make an impact when it worked in a way that nobody was looking at. Thus,
mm,
Fresh has one of the weirdest kind of VC portfolios for a first fund. You don't really see a safe investment in there. They're all really weird, and it's worked out. Putting that into the Aquaria side, though, I think that was like exactly the thing. I had a network for sure, but Aquaria is also very weird, and you have to find people who can believe what is this vision that you're painting. And it's really odd because it's not as if I'm building some esoteric piece of technology, really.
mm.
I'm trying to provide water. And yet you'd be surprised how many people don't understand, like, why is there a need for water? I just started rambling, but yeah, that's some quick high level thoughts about VC and Aquaria.
No, that's very unique to have both of those exposures. But one of the questions that we always ask our guests is, if you are our age, how will you drive impact? But you're pretty much our age. How do you advise young students driving to drive impact in their career?
How do I advise students to be impactful in their career? Be willing to do the work to form your own independent opinions and be willing to share and act on those, even if you're wrong. There's no such thing as a good advice unless you're able to contextualize it within your own context, within your own situation, within your own set of priorities, within your own set of needs. Only with them does it become advice.
Mm,
If the context is not taken into consideration, then the same set of advice could be fantastic for somebody and completely wrong for another person. And the only difference there is really just context. And the only way you
mm,
can develop context for yourself is clarity of thought. And that clarity can be developed by nobody except yourself. Now, of
mm,
course, before you develop an opinion, you could adopt the opinion of others,
mm,
but how do you determine what and why and how unless you do the work. So first is to do the work to be able to develop an opinion. And as you correct or build, then correct your own models for what impact is, you can expand, you can influence, you can share. And I think that's as broad I can speak on this subject because I think
Mm,
impact can be any number of ways, but you can't have impact if you don't know what you're doing and why and how.
mm. Did you know that your impact was going to be in the space of water when you were younger?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's why Fresh was founded was because I had no idea I didn't have any experience. I had no idea how I would make an impact. But I had a set of hypotheses that this Fresh thing could work. I had a set of hypotheses of the type of people I wanted to work with, founders that were way smarter than myself. I had a hypothesis around that maybe I can make impact by working with people that had mission-driven companies, because that just sounds so much cooler than building trivial solution.
Mm,
How cool it would be to rebuild healthcare and provide more effective patient access in hospitals than a video game, perhaps. But that's in my opinion. Not to say video game is not impactful. That's for somebody else. To me, I wanted to contribute in that particular way. Um,
mm,
I think, and then another person might find video games to be the most impactful way. So that's again the clarity of personal thought, right? And for me, definitely didn't know it was in this way. I found impact in every single thing I did, and that moves forward time as I think about whether that has continued to be what I want to do. Millions of people. I think from day one, that's in Fresh's founding thesis. We want to impact the millions of people. As long as we can impact millions of people positively, that's what I've always looked for. Definitely didn't think water was going to be how that happens.
that's super helpful. I think Tim Draper had a very similar mindset when he was investing in companies as a VC. As if you look into 10 years, is the effect of this, how many people can it impact, how many people can it drive, and bring it back to now, that type of technology. If it has the potential to change millions and billions of lives, then that's something that's worth investing.